What happens when comedy's most precise observer meets daytime television's most effusive host? And a simple question about success turns into a battle over authenticity that threatens to destroy both their reputations. You're about to witness one of the most shocking confrontations in talk show history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about these two beloved entertainers. The Kelly Clarkson Show was running its usual upbeat tempo that Tuesday afternoon, with Kelly's infectious energy filling the studio as she prepared for what should have been a routine interview. Jerry Seinfeld, the master of observational comedy, had agreed to appear on the show to promote his latest project. But from the moment he walked onto that familiar set, something felt different. "Jerry Seinfeld, everybody," Kelly announced with her signature enthusiasm as the audience erupted in applause. Jerry waved politely, his trademark smirk firmly in place as he settled into the guest chair across from Kelly's desk. The studio lights bathed everything in that warm, welcoming glow that had become synonymous with Kelly's brand of comfort television. "Jerry, it's so wonderful to have you here," Kelly began, her voice carrying that genuine warmth that had endeared her to millions of viewers. "I have to say, I'm such a huge fan of your work. Seinfeld changed everything for so many of us." Jerry nodded appreciatively. "Well, thank you, Kelly. That's very kind of you to say. I mean, seriously, the show was groundbreaking," Kelly continued, leaning forward slightly. "And now with all your success, the comedy specials, comedians in cars getting coffee, you've built this incredible empire. How does it feel to have achieved everything you set out to do?" There was a slight pause, just a beat longer than usual, before Jerry responded. His smile remained, but something shifted in his eyes. "Well, I'm not sure I'd call it an empire. That's a pretty loaded word, don't you think?" Kelly laughed. That easy, natural laugh that had made her America's sweetheart. "Oh, come on, Jerry, you're being modest. You're one of the most successful comedians of all time. You've got to feel proud of what you've accomplished." "Pride is an interesting concept," Jerry said, his tone becoming slightly more measured. "I think there's a difference between being satisfied with your work and being proud in the way you're suggesting." The audience was still with them, but Kelly sensed something in Jerry's demeanor that made her press a little harder. "But Jerry, you've influenced an entire generation of comedians. You've made people laugh for decades. That has to feel amazing, right?" Jerry shifted in his chair, and his trademark politeness began to show the first hairline cracks. "Kelly, I have to ask, do you actually watch comedy? I mean, really watch it and understand what it's trying to do?" The question hung in the air like an unexpected thunderclap. Kelly's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Of course I do, Jerry. I love comedy. I mean, who doesn't love to laugh?" "That's not what I asked," Jerry said, his voice taking on that familiar edge that fans of his comedy knew well, the one that could slice through pretense like a laser. "I asked if you understand it. There's a difference between consuming something and actually understanding what makes it work." Kelly felt the shift in the room's energy, but her years of live television had taught her to navigate choppy waters. "Well, I think I understand enough to know that making people happy is a beautiful thing, and that's what you do, Jerry." "Making people happy," Jerry repeated, as if testing the words. "Is that what you think comedy is about? Making people happy, isn't it?" Kelly asked, her voice still warm but now carrying a note of genuine confusion. Jerry leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. "Comedy isn't about making people happy, Kelly. That's entertainment. Comedy is about truth. It's about showing people the absurdity of their own existence in ways they hadn't considered before. It's about precision, timing, and honesty." "What you're describing sounds more like a greeting card." The audience was beginning to sense the tension. That uncomfortable feeling when what should be light conversation starts to take on weight. Kelly, ever the professional, tried to steer things back to safer ground. "Well, whatever you want to call it, you're incredibly successful at it. And success in entertainment, that's something to celebrate, right?" "There's that word again," Jerry said, his voice getting sharper. "Success. You keep coming back to that. Tell me something, Kelly. What do you think success actually means?" Kelly paused, realizing that what had started as a standard interview was becoming something else entirely. "I think success means achieving your dreams and making a positive impact on people's lives." "That's a very safe answer," Jerry replied, and there was no hiding the condescension in his tone. "Now, very media-trained, very focus-grouped. But what do you actually think? Not what your producers told you to think, not what sounds good for the cameras. But what do you, Kelly Clarkson, actually believe success means?" The studio had grown noticeably quieter. Even the crew seemed to sense that something was shifting, that the comfortable rhythm of daytime television was being disrupted by something rawer and more unpredictable. Kelly felt the weight of Jerry's challenge, and for the first time in years of hosting, she found herself genuinely off balance. The cameras were still rolling, the audience was watching, and America's most beloved talk show host was being dissected by one of comedy's sharpest minds. "Jerry, I think you're being a little unfair," Kelly said, her voice maintaining its warmth but with a new undercurrent of steel. I've been in this business for over 2 decades. I've worked with incredible artists. I've seen what real talent looks like. Have you? Jerry interrupted. Or have you just been part of a machine that packages and sells the idea of talent? There's a difference, you know. Kelly's smile was becoming more forced now. I think the millions of people who connect with my show and the artists I work with would disagree with you. Millions of people, Jerry repeated mockingly. You know what millions of people also like? Fast food, reality television, lottery tickets. Should we base our definition of quality on what millions of people consume? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the Jerry Seinfeld they'd come to see, the affable comedian who made observational humor about airline food and dating. This was something sharper, more confrontational. Jerry, I don't understand what you're trying to prove here, Kelly said, her professional composure beginning to crack just slightly. Are you saying that bringing joy to people isn't worthwhile? I'm saying that calling it joy when it's really just distraction is dishonest. Jerry shot back. Look around this studio, Kelly. Look at what you've built here. It's all about making people feel good without ever challenging them to think. It's comfort food for the brain. Kelly felt her cheeks flush, but she pressed on. And what's wrong with comfort? What's wrong with giving people a break from all the negativity in the world? Because it's not real, Jerry said, his voice rising slightly. It's manufactured happiness. It's the emotional equivalent of artificial sweetener. Sure, it tastes good going down, but it doesn't actually nourish anyone. The tension in the studio was palpable now. Kelly's producer was making frantic gestures from behind the cameras, but Kelly was too locked into this unexpected battle to back down. So what would you have me do, Jerry? Kelly asked, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Should I make my guests uncomfortable? Should I challenge everyone who comes on here until they storm off? Maybe, Jerry said without hesitation. Maybe that would be more honest than this constant parade of fake positivity and manufactured moments. Kelly stared at him for a moment, and something in her expression shifted. The practiced warmth was replaced by something more genuine, but also more dangerous. You know what, Jerry? She said, leaning back in her chair. You want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about honesty. You've spent the last 30 years making millions of dollars pointing out how stupid and annoying everyone else is. And now you're sitting here acting like you're some kind of truth teller. But what truth are you actually telling? Jerry's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't the direction he'd expected the conversation to go. Kelly continued, her voice gaining strength. You mock people for caring about things. You make fun of anyone who shows genuine emotion or enthusiasm. You've built your entire career on being above it all, on being too cool to actually engage with life in a meaningful way. That's not true, Jerry said, but for the first time since the interview began, he sounded defensive. Isn't it? Kelly pressed. When was the last time you were genuinely vulnerable about anything? When was the last time you admitted you cared about something without immediately undercutting it with a joke? Jerry shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with having the tables turned. Comedy requires distance, Kelly. You can't be objective about human behavior if you're too emotionally invested in it. Or maybe, Kelly said, her voice steady now, you're just scared. Maybe all this intellectual superiority is just a way to avoid having to be real with people. The studio had gone completely silent. Even the crew had stopped moving, transfixed by this unexpected role reversal. Scared, Jerry laughed, but it sounded hollow. Of what exactly? Of being rejected for who you really are, instead of for the character you play, Kelly said quietly. It's easier to be rejected for being too smart, too analytical, too above it all, than it is to be rejected for being genuinely yourself. Jerry stared at her, his usual quick wit seemingly deserting him. For a moment, the mask slipped, and something more vulnerable flickered across his face. You don't know anything about me, he said finally, his voice quieter than before. Maybe not, Kelly acknowledged. But I know what it's like to perform a version of yourself for so long that you start to wonder if there's anything real left underneath. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. The audience wasn't sure whether to applaud or stay quiet, sensing that they were witnessing something unscripted and potentially explosive. Jerry looked around the studio, taking in the cameras, the crew, the expectant faces of the audience. When he turned back to Kelly, his expression had hardened again. This is exactly what I'm talking about, he said, his voice cold now. You think that was profound? You think that little psychological analysis was some kind of breakthrough moment? This is exactly the kind of fake intimacy that passes for depth on shows like this. Kelly's eyes flashed with something Jerry hadn't expected to see. A fierce intelligence that had been hiding behind all that practiced warmth. She leaned forward, no longer the accommodating host but something far more formidable. Fake intimacy, she repeated, her voice cutting through the studio air like a blade. Jerry, you've made a career out of fake detachment. At least I'm trying to connect with people. What are you trying to do besides prove how much smarter you think you are than everyone else? Jerry's jaw tightened, his carefully constructed persona beginning to show serious cracks. I'm trying to be honest about what people actually are, not what they pretend to be. No, Kelly said firmly, you're trying to be safe. You're hiding behind cynicism because it's easier than risking genuine human connection. And you know what the really sad part is? I think you actually believe your own act now. The audience was completely riveted now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was a psychological dissection happening in real time. Jerry stood up abruptly from his chair, his face flushing red. You know what, Kelly, this is exactly why I don't do shows like this anymore. This psychoanalytical garbage. This need to turn everything into some kind of therapy session. Sit down, Jerry, Kelly said calmly, but there was steel in her voice. You started this. You came on my show and decided to tear apart everything I do, everything I've built. You don't get to run away now just because someone finally called you on your nonsense. Jerry remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. My nonsense. I've been doing comedy longer than you've been in show business. I've earned the right to have opinions about what constitutes quality entertainment, and I've earned the right to call out a bitter old comedian who thinks being mean is the same thing as being insightful. Kelly shot back, rising from her own chair now. The two were facing each other across the coffee table, the pretense of a friendly chat show completely abandoned. Bitter. Jerry's voice cracked slightly on the word. I'm not bitter. I'm successful. I'm respected. I have nothing to be bitter about. Kelly shook her head, and for a moment there was something almost pitying in her expression. Jerry, listen to yourself. You're listing your accomplishments like they're evidence that you're not broken inside. Success doesn't fix whatever's eating at you. Nothing's eating at me, Jerry said, but his voice lacked conviction now. I see the world clearly, that's all. I see through the pretense and the fake sentiment and the manufactured emotions. Or maybe, Kelly said quietly, you're so terrified of feeling anything real that you've convinced yourself that all emotion is fake. Maybe you've been performing detachment for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to actually care about something. Jerry stared at her, his mouth opening and closing as if he wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. You want to know what I think? Kelly continued, her voice gentler now but no less penetrating. I think you're jealous. I think you look at what I do, at the genuine connections I make with people, at the joy I help create, and it reminds you of something you gave up a long time ago. Jealous. Jerry finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Of what? Of being able to feel things without immediately analyzing them to death. Of being able to connect with people without always having to prove you're smarter than them. Of being able to find joy in simple things without needing to dissect why they're meaningless. Jerry's hands were trembling slightly now, whether from anger or something else. It was impossible to tell. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Kelly asked. Then why are you shaking? Why can't you sit back down and have a normal conversation? Why did a simple question about success turn into this attack on everything I do? The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras. Jerry looked around wildly, as if suddenly, remembering where he was, that millions of people would eventually see this breakdown. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice getting higher. This whole thing is ridiculous. I came here to promote a project, not to be analyzed by someone who thinks singing contest shows qualify as meaningful television. Kelly's expression hardened. Again, there it is. When all else fails, attack my credentials. Dismiss everything I've said by bringing up my past. That's your move, isn't it, Jerry? When someone gets too close to something real, you just tear them down. Jerry was backing toward the edge of the set now, his publicity instincts warring with his obvious emotional distress. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, Kelly agreed. You can walk away. Just like you've been walking away from anything that might require you to be vulnerable for the last 30 years. But don't pretend it's because I'm wrong. Don't pretend it's because this conversation isn't worth having. Jerry stopped moving, his back nearly against the wall. Now, for a moment, something flickered across his face. Something raw and unguarded. Then it was gone, replaced by a cold fury. You want vulnerability, Kelly, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Here's some vulnerability for you. I think what you do is poison. I think you've built a career on selling people fake happiness and calling it authentic. I think you're everything that's wrong with entertainment today, and the fact that millions of people can't see through it just proves how low our standards have fallen. The words hit Kelly like physical blows, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if Jerry had just confirmed something she'd suspected all along. And there's the real Jerry Seinfeld, she said sadly. Not the observational comedian, not the cultural critic, just a man so afraid of being hurt that he'd rather hurt everyone else first. Jerry's face went completely white, then flushed deep red. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire, crackling with the kind of truth that cuts deeper than any joke ever could. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse under the weight of Kelly's words. How dare you, he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. How dare you psychoanalyze me on national television? You don't know me. You don't know anything about my life, about what I've been through, about what I've accomplished." Kelly remained standing, her posture straight but her expression showing the first signs of regret. She'd pushed harder than she'd intended, gone further than her professional instincts had ever taken her before. "Jerry, I didn't mean to," she began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "No, you meant every word of it," he said, his voice gaining strength as his anger crystallized. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? This is your idea of good television. Tear down the guest, make them vulnerable, get them to break down on camera so you can look like the hero who revealed their true nature." The accusation was unfair, and Kelly knew it, but something in Jerry's broken expression made her hesitate. To defend herself, the studio crew was frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. "I was trying to have a real conversation," Kelly said quietly. "Something honest, something meaningful. Isn't that what you said you wanted? Truth, instead of manufactured happiness." Jerry let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Truth? You think this is truth? This is exploitation. This is exactly the kind of manipulative garbage that passes for authentic television these days." He began fumbling with his microphone, his hands shaking as he tried to remove the small device from his lapel. "I'm done with this. I'm done with all of it." Kelly took a step toward him, her host instincts finally overriding her personal feelings. "Jerry, please, let's just take a breath. We can. What?" he snapped, finally getting the microphone off and dropping it on the coffee table with a small thud. "We can pretend this didn't happen. We can edit this out and go back to talking about my Netflix special like none of this mattered." The audience was completely silent now, watching this legendary comedian completely unravel before their eyes. Some had their phones out, undoubtedly recording what would become one of the most viral moments in talk show history. "Jerry," Kelly said, her voice much gentler now, "I think we both got carried away. This doesn't have to be how this ends." Jerry paused in his retreat toward the exit, turning back to face her one last time. For a moment, the anger seemed to drain out of him, replaced by something that looked almost like exhaustion. "You know what the really pathetic part is?" he said, his voice barely audible. "Part of me actually hoped this would be different. Part of me thought maybe, just maybe, I could come on a show like this and have a real conversation with someone. But it's all the same, isn't it? It's all performance, all manipulation, all designed to make someone look good and someone else look foolish." Kelly felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, though she wasn't entirely sure why. "It doesn't have to be like that, doesn't it?" Jerry asked. "Then why are the cameras still rolling? Why didn't anyone call cut when this stopped being entertainment and started being a public breakdown? Because this is exactly what you wanted. Kelly, this is the kind of raw, authentic moment that gets replayed on every social media platform for the next month." The accusation hit harder because there was a grain of truth to it, and Kelly felt it in her stomach like a punch. She opened her mouth to respond, but Jerry was already walking away. "Jerry, wait," she called after him, but he didn't turn around. "Thank you for reminding me why I stopped doing shows like this years ago," he called back over his shoulder. "And congratulations on getting your viral moment. I'm sure your ratings will be fantastic." With that, Jerry Seinfeld walked off the set of The Kelly Clarkson Show, leaving behind a studio full of stunned crew members, a bewildered audience, and a host who was struggling to process what had just happened. Kelly stood alone on the set for several long moments, the weight of the confrontation settling around her like dust after an explosion. Finally, her producer approached cautiously. "Kelly," he said quietly, "do you want to try to finish the segment?" She looked at the empty chair where Jerry had been sitting just minutes before. Then at the audience, who were staring at her with a mixture of fascination and concern. "No," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think we're done here." She turned to face the cameras directly, her composure slowly returning as her professional instincts kicked back in. But there was something different in her expression now, something more uncertain than the confident warmth her viewers had come to expect. "Well," she said with a shaky laugh, "that certainly wasn't what any of us expected today. I guess sometimes real conversations get messier than we anticipate." She paused, seeming to search for the right words to end what had become one of the most uncomfortable interviews in television history. "I want to thank Jerry for being here, even though I think we both wish it had gone differently. Sometimes when you push for authenticity, you get more than you bargain for." The camera held on her face for a moment longer, capturing an expression that was part regret, part confusion, and part something that might have been understanding. "What do you think? Did Kelly push too hard, or was Jerry's reaction proof that she hit too close to home?" Subscribe if you want to see more stories like this, and comment below with your thoughts on who was really in the wrong here.